What if the monsters of our oldest myths weren't monsters at all? What if they were history? Think about it. We're told a simple story. Humanity evolved, picked up tools, and rose to dominate a wild, empty world. But what if that story has a missing chapter? A chapter so profound, so earth-shattering, it had to be deliberately buried under millennia of folklore and myth. What if, for a time, we were not alone? What if, for a very long time, we were not at the top of the food chain? Today, we're going on a journey to find that lost chapter. We're going to peel back the layers of myth and look for the forgotten truth underneath. First, we'll uncover what I call the global echo, the absolutely stunningly similar stories of giants that appear in disconnected ancient cultures all across the world. Then we'll dive into the code in the texts, deciphering mysterious passages in some of the oldest and most forbidden books ever written. After that, we investigate the anomalies in stone and bone, asking the hard questions about impossible ancient structures and the persistent, controversial reports of giant skeletons that just seem to vanish. And finally, we'll explore a mind-bending theory of the Great Filter, an idea that reframes the Great Flood not as a myth, but as a memory of a planetary reset button. So, stick with me. This is one rabbit hole you won't want to miss. Let's start with that global echo. If you look at the bedrock of mythology from virtually any culture on Earth, you find them. Giants. And I don't just mean big, scary people. I mean a race of beings, powerful and ancient. In Greece, they were the Titans, the primordial beings of immense strength who ruled before the Olympian gods. Think of Atlas holding up the entire sky. In Norse mythology, you have the Jotun of Jotunheimer, the frost giants who were the ancient enemies of the Aesir gods like Thor and Odin. These weren't just lumbering oafs. They were intelligent. They were shapeshifters. They were a force of nature. But it doesn't stop there. Go to Wales. You find the stories of Isbadaden, the chief of giants. In ancient Sumeria, the hero Gilgamesh fights the giant Humbaba. Even in the Americas, the Paiute people have oral traditions of the Site-Ka, a legendary tribe of red-haired, cannibalistic giants they claim to have fought a war against. Now, you could say this is just a common archetype. Humanity has always been fascinated with the idea of big people, but the similarities are often too specific. They are consistently described not just as large, but as an earlier race, a civilization that existed before ours, often possessing great power or knowledge, and frequently wiped out in a cataclysmic event. How did so many cultures, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, all come up with such a similar, specific story? Is it just a coincidence? Or is it a shared, deeply buried memory, an echo of a time when giants truly walked the earth? That echo gets a lot louder when you start looking at ancient texts, not as mythology, but as potential history, and there is no text more scrutinized than the Bible. Tucked away in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 4, is one of the most mysterious and debated passages of all time. It says, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." Let that sink in. The Nephilim. The word itself is often translated as giants, but it can also mean the fallen ones. The passage describes them as the offspring of divine beings, the sons of God, and human women. They were a hybrid race, mighty and famous. But if you want the full, terrifying story, you have to go to a text that was considered so dangerous it was banned from the biblical canon. The Book of Enoch. Enoch was Noah's great-grandfather, and his book tells a much more detailed and frankly horrifying version of events. It describes a group of angels called the Watchers who descended to earth. They lusted after human women, took them as wives, and taught humanity forbidden knowledge, weaponry, sorcery, cosmetics, astronomy. And their children. Their children were the Nephilim. According to Enoch, these giants were colossal, 300 cubits tall. They had an insatiable appetite, and when all the food produced by humans was gone, they began to devour mankind itself. Then they turned on the animals, the birds, and eventually on each other. The world was filled with blood and chaos. The giants had broken the planet. This isn't just a story of a big guy in a fairy tale. This is a detailed account of a genetic transgression, a technological contamination, and a resulting cataclysm that consumed the entire world. It reads less like a myth and more like a terrifying historical record. But words are one thing. What about physical proof? This is where we get into the truly strange anomalies in stone and bone. All over the world, we have megalithic structures that defy easy explanation. At Baalbek in Lebanon, the foundation stones of a Roman temple weigh over 800 tons each. One unfinished block in the quarry nearby, the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, is estimated at 200 tons. To put that in perspective, our largest modern mobile cranes can barely lift that. How did an ancient society, supposedly with only ropes, ramps, and manpower, quarry, carve, and move something so immense? Look at Puma Punku in Bolivia, with its H-blocks carved from diorite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, with such precision that you can't fit a razor blade between them. Or the polygonal walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where multi-ton stones of different shapes and sizes fit together like a perfect jigsaw puzzle. Mainstream archaeology tells us this was all achieved with incredible human ingenuity, time, and labor. And that's absolutely possible. But the what-if question lingers. What if the builders didn't have our limitations? What if the beings moving these stones were giants themselves? And that brings us to the bones. For over a century, there have been persistent reports, often from local newspapers in the 19th and early 20th centuries, of enormous skeletons being unearthed. Skeletons measuring 8, 9, even 12 feet tall, found in burial mounds across North America and other parts of the world. The accounts are often detailed, describing double rows of teeth or elongated skulls. Now, here's the frustrating part. The mainstream scientific explanation is that these are simply hoaxes, misidentified mastodon bones, or sensationalized journalism. And many of them probably were. But the stories almost always end the same way. A representative from a major institution, often the Smithsonian, arrives to collect the bones for further study, and they are never ever seen or heard from again. Is this just responsible science, cleaning up the historical record and discarding fakes? Or is it something else? Is it a deliberate suppression of evidence that would fundamentally rewrite the story of our past? So if this powerful race of giants existed, and if they were as destructive as the Book of Enoch claims, where did they all go? This leads us to our final, and perhaps most startling, piece of the puzzle. The Great Filter. We all know the story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood, but what most people don't realize is that it's not a uniquely biblical story. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh has an almost identical flood myth that predates Genesis by 1,000 years. Ancient Greece had the myth of Deucalion. Hindu scriptures tell of Manu. From Mayan traditions to Aboriginal Australian lore, a catastrophic, world-ending flood is a near-universal memory in human culture. Now, what if the Great Flood wasn't a punishment for human sin? What if the target was never us? What if the flood was a great filter, a deliberate planetary-scale reset button pushed to wipe the world clean of the Nephilim? These beings were too powerful, too destructive. They were consuming the planet's resources, corrupting humanity, and derailing the entire project of life on Earth. They had to be removed. In this light, the flood becomes a cataclysmic but necessary event. It wiped the slate clean, removed the dominant, overpowering species, and allowed our story, the story of humanity, to finally begin. We weren't the first draft. We were the second, given a chance to thrive only after the first draft was violently erased. The myths that survived are just the faintest scars of that ancient trauma. So we're left with these echoes, these whispers from a time before our time, a global memory of giants, ancient texts describing a fallen race, impossible stones that defy our understanding of the past, and a universal myth of a great cataclysm that washed the world clean. What do you believe? Are the giants of mythology a shadow of a lost truth, or merely the product of human imagination? Share your theories and evidence in the comments below. I truly want to know what you think. If you enjoy digging into history's greatest secrets, subscribe and ring the bell to join our exploration into the unknown. We have many more mysteries to unravel.